everybody. Welcome to Hashing It Out. I'm Jordan Mack. I'm a senior software engineer here at the Nervos Foundation. And today I'm joined by Eric Vanderwall, who is the lead of developer relations and support engineering. Wait, did I get that right, Eric?
Yeah, thanks for having me here today. Yeah, so I'm the head of developer relations and support engineering. We like to throw that on there in the end because, even if that's not the name of the department, it's certainly something that we do.
Right. Okay. So let's see. Just to get started here, let's see. I believe Nate wanted me to quickly first just mention this is the second episode of Hashing It Out here in our new format. And I wanted to recap why we're doing this. This is, we did a whole bunch of episodes, as everybody who's listened in the past, on Twitter Spaces, and we kind of outgrew that a little bit. We wanted to do more with the show, and we found that we were kind of diverging in different directions. So we decided to split it up. And at the same time, we wanted to freshen it up and actually take a slightly different approach. So you'll probably notice, like in the last episode that we had with Kevin, it was much more casual in some regards. And it's actually also much more preparation involved with it. So it's switched now to Hashing It Out is now a monthly format. We do it once a month. And we still have a whole bunch of stuff going on Twitter Spaces, though. So we're running through stuff regularly on that, and that's all happening on the Nervos Education and Events channel on Twitter, which I think is actually getting rebranded. Eric, do you know, are we actually rebranding that one?
Yeah, so by the time you hear this, maybe it's even done, since there might be a couple of days delay before this hits any channels. But yeah, it's going to be rebranded into Build Club, and we're going to focus down a little bit on the content.
Great. Yeah, so that's coming up really soon. So let's get straight into the platform updates, because we have a whole bunch of that stuff to go through. First up is the major protocol upgrade, which just occurred. That's the hard fork to Mariana, which occurred successfully on May, that's 9th or 10th, depending on where you are in the world. Went completely smoothly, no hiccups, just continued working like it was supposed to. And so generally speaking, I would say so far from the community, it's been very positive feedback on that. This is one of those updates. This is more of a developer update. So like the end users, they don't really see too much of it, but they've been well aware of it. We've been definitely blasting out there what this was about and what we were trying to accomplish. So they're pretty aware that this is just an upgrade that is going to pay dividends into the future. And they've been very good. The community's been very good this time around about being patient with some of the problems that have arose, which are not related to the hard fork itself, but generally due to dApps or people in the ecosystem, our partners, exchanges that didn't quite handle the upgrade exactly. Some of them unfortunately missed the deadline, but they were working diligently to get caught up there. And I think the most of the ones I was keeping in touch with, it seems like they have now upgraded. I'm not sure. There's one or two that might still be outliers. Eric, are you aware of any right now that are still doing their updates?
None that I'm aware of at the moment. This is a case, I think, of where, the Nervos Foundation itself gives out as much information as possible, and we offer support to, everyone who will accept it to do the changes needed for the hard fork. But the blockchain does what the blockchain does, and the hard fork is set in stone and it happens. So, if there is anyone out there who hasn't done it, we are still here to support them.
Yeah, and we prepared a whole bunch of materials for that as well. I worked on some of that personally.
Yes.
And that went well, I would have to say. And that's mainly me gauging it by it being very quiet. And quiet generally tends to be good, because that means that they're not experiencing too many problems. So, even though the ones that did miss out on the deadline and came around and said, hey, I need help, the ones I helped, they seemed to catch it on really quickly. I just pointed them at the documentation, in some cases, pointed them to the specific section they needed, and then didn't hear another thing from them. So I'm going to assume that they actually got through it fairly well. So definitely, like, this is a big update, big upgrade for our entire ecosystem here. A quick summary of some of the things that happened: the extensible block header, which is going to give us the Fly client in the future. This year, I think they were supposed to get. Jan said on one of his live streams that they're trying to get an early version, an early beta or something this year. So hopefully we'll see that. Of course, the improved virtual machine, that's CKB-VM, which is now a little bit faster and has some new features in there that are really good for developers. The new address format, which is kind of tags along with the virtual machine to make some of that stuff happen. And then the upgraded Omni lock, which is replacing PW lock, and is really, it's a pretty deep lock, I gotta say. In terms of the script, there's a lot of functionality there. Like, I use some of it. I haven't even delved into the entire thing. It's a really feature-rich a fully audited lock system that I think is really going to be a great building block for us to work with. Let's see. So the next thing let's get into is Godwoken version 1 layer 2 launch. That's happening pretty soon. I think we just got the testnet up. So Eric, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so that's right. We just did get the testnet up. I think it was announced a couple of days ago, and we had it sort of in a private beta for about a week before that, just so we made sure that we deployed as much as possible and test it out. And we want to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it and make sure that it works well before we say, here's the testnet, come deploy stuff. And it certainly comes with a bunch of new benefits. And I think the biggest one is, in my mind, is that it's 100% EVM compatible, which means, you can use, Solidity tools and all the tools that you would use with Ethereum right out of the box, right? You don't need to make any changes or adjustments necessarily, which makes the process for developers so much easier. And, with that, I expect to see a lot more applications coming. Of course, this is sort of the same as before, but it's very cheap. It's essentially gasless at the moment. There might be some gas fees added, but it will be, ridiculously cheap, comparatively speaking, to anywhere else. We have, it's running a little bit faster than it was due to some RPC changes, which is, great. Of course, it's always been built on top of the Nervos L1, which acts as the settlement layer, which is great as well. And I think the other really big thing, of course, other than the EVM compatibility, and this is probably the first announcement around it, we'll see, is there's no more whitelisting here. And that's something that we've always been working towards. And now we just feel really comfortable about the technology and where it is, that we feel like, hey, come launch something on the L2, and we're confident that it's going to work out well.
Yeah, and from the internal teams that have been working on it, and actually I shouldn't say internal, some of the external teams that have been working with the new testnet, from what I'm hearing, I'm getting very, very positive feedback. Some of the early, you could call it like, I'm going to call it like a beta testnet. The early ones the first guinea pigs to try it out before it was really formally out there. So they were making things happen really, really quickly. I mean, as in terms of projects that had previously taken days to weeks, were now just taking hours to days to port over. So major benefit there with the EVM compatibility being EVM equivalent, I believe they're calling it. So yeah, this is exciting. I think this is really going to be a game changer for our ecosystem here.
Yeah, totally. So we have had, upwards of a dozen applications launched through Build Club onto testnet already, within the first 2 or 3 days of it being available. In an earlier version of testnet, like version 1. So we're currently in version 1.1 of testnet, but we had a version 1. And, we had, again, like dozens of applications launch on it. And, they were all successful in doing so. And again, we tried to, throw everything we could at it just so we can see where any issues might occur. And if we found them, then we, squished those issues and moved on.
Right. So we got the testnet that's up and running now. What about the mainnet? Do we have any details on that?
Yeah, so traditionally mainnet is a 1-month process where we give it 1 month for people to launch applications and like I said, sort of throw the whole kitchen sink at it. And then if everything goes well during that month period, then we feel that it's we're confident to release it. And so this is just a matter of normal procedure or process that it goes through. So with that, I think we would expect it sort of, just checking my calendar here, that would sort of be like mid to late June. And it's a little bit difficult with these things because people always want exact dates, but we typically don't have them because we want it to come out as fast as absolutely possible. So like when it's ready, we will release it rather than give it an artificial date at a later time and then make everyone wait, even though it's actually ready. So we'd certainly get a lot of questions of like when mainnet, but the truth is like as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, definitely with certain things like Yokai Swap is a big one for our DeFi ecosystem. I know they just announced on Twitter that they're on the new testnet now. So definitely, like, I'm sure everybody would love that to be out quick, but it's I would absolutely opt for make sure that it's done right. Right? I mean, we can't. This is a DeFi application. We can't cut corners on this stuff. Let's just make sure that it's done properly. So let's see. So let's move on to the next section here. Some of the program updates. So let's see. Web3 champs. Let me take this one. So this was the hackathon that just ended. That was a 6-week hackathon. It ended in May. When exactly did that end? Did you remember, Eric?
Oh gosh, no, I don't remember the date off of hand, but we have what I do know is we just paid out all the winners, so yay. And now we are actually in the process of organizing to mail out some of our limited edition Nervos SafePal hardware wallets. That's a mouthful, which are these like really awesome SafePal wallets, hardware wallets with Nervos branding on it. And we worked together with SafePal to create it. And you can't buy them. You essentially have to enter, one of our giveaways, or you have to come to a hackathon or meet us in an event, and then you can get one of these really cool SafePal wallets. So we're just in the process of sending those out because, people are from all over the world for our hackathons.
You're sending them out. It's physical. It's not an NFT.
Yeah, I know. I wish it was an NFT. Every time we have to send any kind of bank transfer for work now, it's like the most tedious thing versus like, can you please just give me your address so I can send you some CKB or USD? So this feels sort of equivalent where I can't just NFT someone. I have to mail them out something, but it's worth the wait.
Right. And then, so what did our participation look like for the hackathon?
Yeah, we had really good participation and it almost surprised me even. So we had, I think, officially 1,155 participants, and we had that spread across a couple different, categories and tracks. But of course, I think sort of all eyes are always on the main prize here, which is essentially the traditional hackathon path.
Right, definitely. And let's see. So that one I have here listed, that was GeoSwap. Am I pronouncing that right? Do we know how that's pronounced?
I think it's GeoSwap. I keep saying GiroSwap for some reason, but it's definitely GeoSwap. And yeah, we've definitely been in contact with the team. And I believe it's actually a team of 3 people, and they are Canadian, which is nice. Represent. I'm from Canada. So they are planning to continue to work on the project, and we've been in touch with them. They've joined Build Club, which we'll talk about Build Club a little bit later. But it's a pretty cool application. So, I don't know what to say other than I'm happy that they've decided to stick around and build on Nervos.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like the project. I was one of the judges on that one, and I think it's pretty cool. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a multi-chain stable swap service. It only has stable coins on it, and it enables swapping. And when I first saw it, I was like, kind of like, huh? Why would you build a DEX that only does stable coins? But there's actually a really good reason for it, and it has to do with the way that things like Uniswap, they use the automated market makers, and those can kind of get expensive sometimes because they have to constantly adjust the rates, the exchange rates there. And so you get slippage is what it's called, when a whale comes in and makes a big dump or a big buy on one side, it'll change the other side. But if you're doing stable coins, you don't actually have to do that same exact method because you know that the coins are basically going to be about the same, nearly the same. And so for that reason, they can use different algorithms for that and make it much more cost effective for whoever's using it. So it's pretty cool. I see this as being definitely like something you want in your DeFi ecosystem. And this is GeoSwap happens to be a multi-chain one, so it's a cool project. Yeah, I'm definitely glad to have them as part of our ecosystem now.
Yeah, definitely with the Web3 champs, we saw like a wide range of skills, people who are like absolute beginners and people who are, more seasoned developers, which is really nice to see in what we want to encourage in the ecosystem.
All right, so let's move on to BlockJam, which is going to be a big topic here, I think. But before we really roll into that, I know that you and we both have a little bit of backgrounds in gaming in general and also professionally. So do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't talk that much about my professional history in public, but, certainly it's on my LinkedIn if people want to go check. So, but I've been a developer for about 20 years now. And very long story short, I started what would have been like Web 1 essentially. And Web 2 came around and I continued in that space, especially in the startup space. But a bunch of years ago, I got introduced into game development as a profession, and I did that for a couple of years. And honestly, I really loved it. I think game development is such a fun place to be, and it's an incredibly, or can be, it doesn't have to be, can be an incredibly challenging topic. It really depends on the kind of games and things you want to do. So I spent a bunch of years there. I did some developer advocacy in that space and tool development and everything. So that was probably, I think, the last professional thing I did, in this space before I moved into Web3. So it's still near and dear to my heart for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. That definitely that you can bring that to Nervos, especially when just in general Web3 gaming type stuff is definitely on the rise. And and in terms of like professional experience with gaming, like I think for a short period I did some video game testing. So not too much there. I did work in an arcade when I was pretty young for a little bit less than a year. That was fun. I will say this though. I love working at Nervos, and but the game working in an arcade was a very unique experience.
Yeah, I was going to say that it does sound like fun.
It is one of the best jobs I think I ever had, and it's because I had actually started programming at that time, and it was just kind of like I'd be working basically two jobs at one. I'd bring my laptop in there and I'd start working on my own projects, and then when my friends would come in, we'd just play some games or something. It was actually it was really fun. But gaming is actually what got me into programming in the first place, is because when I was growing up, I wanted to make video games. And so I learned how to program so that I could figure out how to make video games. And then by the time I got a little older and I realized that video games were no longer my entire life, I found out that I actually liked programming even more. And so I started moving into more internet web stuff. And then down the line, many years later, once blockchain finally came out, I decided that was going to be my future. So anyway, we both mutually have some backgrounds in this stuff, so I'm excited about it. And so
you might get another crack at it here. So we can talk about BlockJam, where it's sort of the crashing, the merging of worlds here. And yeah, so certainly BlockJam is something that we had discussed internally for a while, like, what kind of events do we want to do? What kind of directions do we want to pursue, both personally and as a Nervos Foundation? And I think we have seen sort of the rise of blockchain gaming in various formats over this past year, or even especially the last 6 months. And for me personally, that's, super exciting. And the idea is like, how can we support this further? What can we do to explore this, as a blockchain? And so we came up with this event called BlockJam, which is, I think the word is portmanteau. Is that how we say it? So a smashing of two words together. So we have blockchain and game jam. And so people who are not maybe familiar with this, game jam is essentially what hackathons are called in the game development world, but it's a very similar process. So we have smash these together, BlockJam.
Yeah, definitely. So like this is a program for game developers, and it's starting on June 18th. Is that right? That's the official start?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a kickoff talk. And so honestly, that will probably just be me on the 17th at night or something. And so that will be pre-recorded. And basically it'll be maybe just 1 hour long to talk about, what we're doing and welcome people and everything. So that way on the 18th, which would be Saturday, we can just like roll right into it without having to do, any type of formality. And what's going to happen is that we have essentially 2 days of talks. And in this process, well, maybe I'll circle back to that. We'll have 2 days of talks, and then we'll have 14 days of game jam. And, basically the first part is like, upskilling people and getting them ready. And then they have 14 days to test things out. And what's kind of unique about this program, and I haven't seen any other that are really focused the way that ours is that we're really going out to game developers to bring them into blockchain instead of saying, hey, Web3 developers, please learn how to make games. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. And we haven't announced the actual talks yet. We will actually in a couple of days. But we have 3 types of talks in general. And I think one of them that's like really important is that there's a soft introduction to blockchain. Like we are literally going to say, we're explaining what are tokens, what are NFTs, how does the blockchain work, what are the different types of blockchains. And I haven't really seen this in a lot of other events. And while certainly you can go out there and educate yourself on it, and probably a lot of our audience has, it's nice to have it sort of all together in a package specifically for developers, people who are already somewhat savvy developers at least, but bring them into Web3 in that way. So that's one part. The second part is we have very topic specific things. So we're going to look at token economics for gaming. We are going to look at possibly like distribution, how you can distribute Web3 games and, do software updates and keep them up to date. We're going to talk about where to store your data, how to do that. And then, we have a lot of different speakers coming in who are, domain specific experts, which certainly I'm not because there are so many different areas. And then the last part, we're going to focus on workshops, like how to practically implement this in your game. And we're going to focus on Unity as a game engine because it makes up around 80% of the indie market, give or take. And so by the time they get to the end of these 2 days, they are not only going to be onboarded to Web3 and learn about some best practices, but also have sort of the practical skills to implement it, which then brings us into those 14 days of them, testing it out, figuring out what they do know and what they did learn and what they didn't learn and where they might need more help so that we'll be there to do that.
Yeah. This is a very interesting program, and from what I've seen in blockchain games, there's really, you do see those 2 halves that you had mentioned there, where it's blockchain trying to add gaming, and then gaming trying to add blockchain. And in the first half of that, where blockchain has been trying to add gaming, there's been a lot of not too successful projects. And I think part of that is they underestimated what it actually takes to make a good game. It's enormously complex these days. I mean, we've even seen, just in the gaming industry in general, we've seen multi-million-dollar projects, some of the mega budget studios that came up with a complete dud now and then. It's tough. It's tough to make a game. Like there used to be way back when I was a beta tester and I did some game testing. Like there was a joke that used to go around about how, I forget the exact joke, but it was like basically they got everything right except they couldn't make it fun. And yeah, and that was that was unfortunately certain games that way. This was around the time that there was a big push of going from like 2D to 3D. And so they were all kinds of focused on the graphics and just making this thing look spectacular. And they accomplished that. But the game just wasn't fun. And they'd completely lost that. And so it's interesting. Just I see a parallel there
Hmm.
between what they're trying to do in blockchain, and especially when I start to see some of the gaming companies that are trying to adopt blockchain, they're struggling with that as well. They don't
Hmm.
understand the tokenomics. They don't understand how to bring NFT elements in properly. And I think part of that is it's still an evolving type of thing. So
Hmm.
this seems like this would be a really great boon to them to actually give them that jump start and really prep them for what they can go forward on.
Yeah, so we've seen definitely, I like to call it adding blockchain to gaming versus gaming to blockchain. And so I can give an example to that. So adding gaming to blockchain, I think Axie's Infinity is a great example of that. And certainly, I think it's undisputed that they've been very successful. Of course, there's ups and downs and that sort of stuff, but they are so well known within the industry. But for the most part, they are gaming added to blockchain versus they weren't necessarily a game first that then utilized blockchain technology in some way, which is really what we're going to be focusing on here more. And there's certainly a spectrum between that, of course. Um, but for me personally, my heart is towards the direction of what we're calling play and earn, meaning it's optional. It's not going to misbalance the game or make the game bad, versus play to earn, which would be something like Axes.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost it's a little bit of a misleading thing when they say play to earn because somebody has to put money into the system, so not everybody's earning here in
Correct.
general. Yeah.
Correct.
Um, yeah, and then I know there's also there's been big backlash recently about some of
Hmm.
the NFT things about because they see it as game companies just doing a money grab and doing more pay
Hmm.
to win type systems, which the gaming community largely seems to hate.
Yeah. So I think, again, there's sort of a lot of room, right? We have a lot of popular free to play games that have done well. For example, like one that I sort of enjoyed was Genshin Impact, I think has been a little more well known. And when I'm playing a game like that and I invested like a lot of time, I certainly invested a certain amount of money. For me personally, for example, I would love to be able to say, okay, I'm done playing this game. I want to exit from playing this game and I'm going to, sell off some of my items that maybe someone else wants to buy to, boost up faster. And blockchain basically offers, the way to do this that's essentially fraud proof using existing marketplaces, existing technology, so it doesn't need to be reinvented. And I think that's sort of a criticism I often hear is like, well, we could build that ourselves. And you certainly could. I mean, anyone could go out and basically start up their own blockchain. That's, it's just a matter of how much time and money and investment you want to do to reinvent the wheel when tools already exist. So especially when it comes to indie game developers, the shortest path is basically saying like, hey, these tools exist. These are ways that you can use them. And sort of let them go at it, because as an indie game developer myself, I was super excited to learn about new technology and how I could implement it to give my game an edge that would make it more popular, more fun, more accessible, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can totally see that, especially in the indie game market, they'll be the first ones to adopt a lot of this stuff. I kind of think
Hmm.
that a bunch of the larger companies are going to be a little bit slow to move on some of this stuff. And part of that is because their existing titles, the games that have the I guess you could call it the methodology that they've used to develop these things, has to be
Hmm.
changed around so much to adopt some of this new technology and bring it in. And the example I always use is a game like Diablo, which most
Hmm.
people have probably played by now, where they have all these weapons and you get gold from just killing random enemies on the screen. That doesn't seem to work too well when you're talking about NFTs and stuff now, because that's creating inflation basically. That's
Hmm.
just killing randomly spawning things. It's just creating coins out of nothing. So if you're in an ecosystem now, which has a basically a static supply of some kind, it's not inflationary, all of a sudden your game model doesn't properly work. So, I mean, where this is going is, I
There
think
are
there's still definitely,
challenges.
yeah, there's definitely some challenges that I'm actually personally excited on seeing what actually happens here, how they're actually able to solve this stuff. Because the next
Yeah.
big thing, once they actually get past that and figure out a fun way to actually use a fixed supply of some kind, the door is wide open for interoperability now, especially with NFTs and basically taking characters or in-game items from game to game. And
So
that would be a huge thing.
yeah, you're gonna have to come now. So anyone who's listening to this, this has been my question. So we have two different speakers coming in to talk about token economics. And I had the same question to both of them actually. And they both said, okay, yeah, let's discuss this. Let's talk about it. And so that actually is something we're going to talk about, hopefully, is about so this runaway inflation and economic sinks and making sure that that stuff goes back, that those coins go back into the economy. So that's one. Two is actually, I think I just managed to convince another speaker to come in yesterday who is going to talk about ways to help prevent cheating within the system. And by doing sort of a type of KYC, and I say a type of because we don't necessarily want to give out our personal information, but certainly what we're seeing with play to earn games, and this has happened with other games in the past, is where you have essentially one person botting many games or one person, running 2 or 3 games at the same time. So now we've gotten to the point where we're starting to figure out ways to avoid or to circumvent these kinds of, essentially cheating. So I love the questions because I think these are the kind of questions that we're going to continue to ask, and which is, so important that we have domain specific experts coming in to help guide us in the process.
Yeah, well, it definitely sounds exciting. So I'll make sure put that on my calendar as well. I definitely want to hear some of the answers to that. That's been an open question of mine for quite some time. So let's see, what's the
Mhm.
best place for them to get more information? Would it be the website?
Yeah, I would definitely go to the website, and it's global blockjam, all one word, .com. So unfortunately, BlockJam was gone. So we went global BlockJam because it's an online global event. So that's where you can find more information and registration links. And I think, again, in the next couple of days, we're going to have our talk list up.
Okay, awesome, awesome. All right, so
Oh,
everybody make
I
sure
should
to
probably,
go ahead.
sorry, I'm, going to talk over you there. I should throw in one more thing there too, or maybe two things. One is it's free. So, honestly, whether you're a game developer or not, if you want to learn more about the industry and about blockchain in general, like come and listen to the talks for sure. Right. So there's an, unlimited amount of, I should not say that, maybe I not creating enough FOMO, but there's an unlimited amount of seats. So come and listen, and ask questions. So that's great. The other thing I better mention before we move on is there's prizes. There's prizes to win. So we're going to be giving away quite a bit of either cash, crypto, or prizes. We have sponsors, we have people setting bounties and all kinds of stuff. So definitely check that out as well.
Yeah. So I'm excited about this. Because actually me and Eric were just talking before we started recording. Gaming might be the next big thing in blockchain, where nobody
Mhm.
can really predict that accurately, but we saw the DeFi rise, we saw NFTs rise. I think gaming is due for that.
I hope so. At least for me, it's more fun. Maybe I'm not going to get rich quick, but I can certainly enjoy the process, the ride along the way. So,
All right, cool. So let's move on to some of the QA. So we had some questions from the community that were given here by Nate. Nate selected these. So let's see. First one here. I have read several of your academic papers about ZKP, that's zero knowledge proofs, and I find them super interesting. Have you delved in the same way in the investigation of state channels?
I I have
Go
to
ahead.
say, yeah, I'm impressed that people are reading those papers because honestly, I've done nothing but read the summaries. So, to the people asking these questions, pat yourself on the back and good job. So it's very good.
Yeah, I've read many papers, but I have not really gone too deep into ZK personally. Like I understand the basics. I've watched a lot of videos on it. I do not fully understand it personally. But so I took this question. I actually asked Jan, who is our main architect, and he said we haven't really gotten into it too deep yet. And a big part of this is because state channels, which are very likely to be a part of Nervos's future. I mean, if somebody remembers our previous roadmap, state channel research was on there. This is definitely something we want to, direction we want to go. But unfortunately, the research was paused, and because we had to divert those engineers to other areas that required more urgent attention. So it's, as far as I know, it's still on pause, but it's something we absolutely want to go deeper into. But on the topic of ZK, our current roadmap does still have some things on there. Let's see, I'm basically just taking some quotes directly off our roadmap right now, which is Nervos will present 2 new tools for the development of ZK snarks named VO Proof and VO RAM, or VO, like VORAM. I'm not sure
I
how
don't,
you're
I don't
supposed to.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So VO Proof provides simple and intuitive language for describing ZK snark design, and the compiler transformed the language into working code of the ZK snark. Based on the VO Proof tool set, Nervos has developed VO RAM, which focuses on automatic creation of ZK snark based on RAMs, a class of computational models that are friendly to programs. If you didn't understand that, I didn't either. Okay, so I'm an engineer here. I didn't understand really what that was about. I just know that they're trying to make ZK something that is much easier to accomplish on Nervos. So it's an interesting thing. Anybody can find the details of that on our 2022 roadmap. So let's go on to the next question, which is, when will the whitelisting for projects on layer 2 end and make it more decentralized to launch? Eric, you want to take that one?
Yeah, the future is now. So testnets have always been, there's been no whitelisting on any of the testnets, from the very beginning. And we had a very, I would call, whitelisting light process. The only thing that was involved in whitelisting was not to be essentially malicious code, right? Or to be a spam application. So those were the only 2 that we sort of looked at when it came to whitelisting, and everything else was whitelisted. So there was no real gatekeeping process at all for whitelisting. So I just want to make that clear first. However, now we are pretty confident with the technology. So whitelisting will be gone from the new Godwoken version 1.1 mainnet. So anyone will be free to launch however, whenever they want. Of course, that always does bring, more risks to the community itself. As a public, permissionless, open source blockchain, we do not control what's launched on Nervos or, how that technology is used. So, that's just a reminder to the community to always do your own research.
Yeah, definitely. You always got to try to be safe out there. There's, as we know in this industry, too many scams, too many by far. And you gotta take precautions out there with all of them, even the ones that are safe. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with the same Web 2.0 technology to power a lot of these things. And what I mean by that is a lot of them are running on Amazon Web Services, right? And so if somebody gets into those, occasionally they can inject some code in there, and there's usually some telltale signs, which I'm not going to go into. But people, you got to be careful. You just absolutely got to be careful. Use multiple wallets. Use all these precautions that people put out there. There's entire guides that have been written on this, on what you can do. And we really should start doing this just as an industry. Make this common practice that you take these precautions, because, and maybe even split it up to, like, here's your play money and your gaming account, right? That you're using for gaming accounts. And separate that from your main stuff. Put in your main savings, your main investment, go in cold wallets all the time. You never touch those except from an isolated computer. I mean, anyway, don't want to get into the whole topic of security. It's still just, it's one of those things you got to just take it seriously, because there are absolutely no guarantees there. Websites get hacked once in a while. We've seen some of that recently in the news, and you got to do what you can to be safe.
I mean, even beyond that, right? There's always the case where, there is no hack, that people write malicious code or programs to begin with, or, maybe people have best intentions and they're not good developers. maybe they are great developers and they have best intentions, or in the market turns, right? So, especially if you're using DeFi projects, or you're maybe investing in NFTs for, looking for a financial upside, we can't predict the market, and, no one can. So certainly, again, do your own research, be as cautious as possible. And, I think both me and you, Jordan, we are pretty cautious people in general about how we do these sort of things by nature. That's our default. So, I would like to encourage other people to do the same.
Yeah, and definitely. Let me just add one more thing on that, which you
Mhm.
just touched on, which is it's not always a malicious effort. Sometimes it's just it's people who are a little less experienced. I mean, when you open the door to everybody, you're letting in people who are
Mhm.
very experienced and people who are not so experienced. And I think one of the greatest things that I've seen in these permissionless environments is it's allowing sometimes like college kids who are just starting to write their to code, basically. Like they're not really professional developers, they don't have professional
Yeah.
experience, and they're experimenting out there. And this has of course a good and a bad, the bad being
Mhm.
that they don't particularly know the best practices, they're not particularly writing the best code, and they don't have the funds to go through an audit. But the good part of that is they sometimes, we've seen in this industry that they are the biggest innovators. They've actually
Mhm.
created these projects which have been massively successful. I mean, that's something that's the kind of thing that ends up being a Hollywood movie, right? About the whiz kid who comes out and right out of the gate and somehow builds like $1 billion application.
It exists. It exists. These movies are around, certainly fictionalized to a certain degree, but, they exist. And we've seen all kinds of them happen in Web 2 much slower. And I think in Web 3, we are seeing them happen much faster.
Yeah, and a part of that is the experimental nature of it. I mean, definitely there's the people who are willing to take the risks
Yeah.
they are paving the way for everybody else. They're helping the industry as a whole to learn. So it's a good thing, but of course, yes, the certain things happen, bad things that happen that can sometimes cause people to lose money. So you got to do your research on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question here was, what ways can Nervos ensure the pioneer generation of dApps on L2 are of good enough quality to inspire trust in the community while still staying as permissionless as possible?
I feel like we've talked about it now a little bit. I feel like it's a bit of a trick question, because we can't ensure anything, right? Because it is permissionless. And instead, what we can try and do is offer guidance, support, advice, and everything like that. But at the end of the day, everyone's application is their own application, and they're going to do whatever they want to do. So, to that end, we have started Build Club as a way to offer advice and to support to projects. But again, these are people's own projects, and they are able to launch with or without us, and they will certainly do so. That being said, I think Build Club so far has been like an amazing project that has been very successful in a short amount of time, encouraging people to build and to give them certain forms of support. And I would just point out, support here is not necessarily endorsement, but in fact is support. And that could be either through a small grant, through some marketing advice or community advice, advice about how to set up their Discord securely. And it offers, of course, a place for peer-to-peer support where these different projects that are building are able to communicate with each other and say like, hey, I'm building this, maybe we should connect or work together, or what do you think about this? And it's that kind of a supportive environment that I think is probably the best thing we can possibly do to inspire good applications while still staying permissionless.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's only so much you can do on that, but if you can give them the initial support, get them pointed in the right direction, I think that's really the best you can do. I know that there's also some, I've been in contact with some venture capitalists and some friends of mine who work with venture capitalists, and they run accelerators, and that's
Mhm.
pretty much all they can do too. They just give them they give them the best guidance they can for these aspiring teams, and they're providing them with funding and stuff as well. But ultimately, it's up to the individuals there doing the actual work on whether they rise or fall. There's nothing they can guarantee.
Yeah, and with Build Club, essentially, you know, our focus is on grassroots builders. So some of these builders, again, are incredibly new, and some of them are more experienced teams. And certainly we do give funding support in the form of grants through Build Club, and they're typically small grants. And I feel like I should point out that these are not investments. We don't own, you know, tokens in any projects that go through it. There's like no, set process for that. Instead, these are small grants to help them cover the cost of maybe, you know, getting more front end support, or maybe helping them to pay for an audit or these types of things.
Right, yeah, and audits, that can be a big one. So I mean, that's a huge,
it's expensive.
I've seen.
Yeah, audits are not cheap for sure. So I don't know. I mean, so as a community, so outside of the building circle itself, I'm not really sure like how aware people are of how audits work. And, you know, the process, not only that they're expensive, but also there's often like a wait time and a delay for it. And that there's certain things that audits check for, not others, right? So audits are not necessarily to protect the community, right? So often audits are essentially to check the code to make sure that there's no security holes, which is not necessarily the same thing, right? And that people who are running dApps, like any program, have a large variety in the way that they want to run them. You know, they do what they're programmed to do, and there's, you know, essentially people operating that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, an audit, even as thorough of an audit as you can get, is never a guarantee. I think that's important to point out, because it is still just people basically going through and reviewing the code. It's people who are highly skilled at finding these security holes, and they take an effort to really understand how the program is operating, and they really will scrutinize it to make sure that the thing is top notch in that regard. But there's no guarantees that they can't miss something. And there's also no guarantee that after the audit, a bug doesn't get introduced, because I don't think people realize this. An audit is, they just review one version. After the audit's done, development's still going. So it's like you have definitely some assurance there, right? You have the assurance that it got looked at, but it's never, there's no way to do full assurance. Not even something like formal verification is foolproof by any means. It's just another method of trying to go through a process that we know does yield some results. In some cases
it's a best faith effort, right? There are no guarantees in life, unfortunately. But, you know, there's no excuse, of course, not to do it when it's necessary. So, you know, we still need to make that best faith effort. But again, it always comes down to, you know, do your own research as much as possible. And, you know, again, I'm fairly risk adverse myself. So, I am too. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I have some
buddies
to
the choir here. So
yeah, pretty much. Like, yeah, I mean, like, I have stayed out of pretty much all the DeFi stuff. I've watched some of my friends make tremendous gains, but also wipe out as well. It's I don't know. It's something I can't get into, and I'm usually a late mover to most things, actually, just because I want to see which ones really stand the test of time. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do in our industry, where it moves so quickly and it changes so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that being said, we want to support all kinds of applications, like not only DeFi applications, of course, through Build Club, but we support, you know, NFT projects. And, you know, I really love supporting like utility projects that offer, you know, certain kinds of utilities and functions. And those ones are, you know, again, incredibly diverse in what we see. So, you know, as far as Build Club goes, basically there are no rules as to what types of projects, except for, you know, essentially integrations are not part of Build Club, because those aren't, you know, typically grassroots builders. But otherwise, we don't necessarily discriminate in the type of projects that come in, and instead are focusing more on, you know, giving advice and support as much as possible.
All right, so let's move on here. Next question, which is, what is Nervos doing to get more games on the platform? So I reached out to our BD department to just quickly ask them that, and that they're always talking to all kinds of teams in the industry about potential partnerships. And there's not really I don't think a set industry that they're targeting or anything, but they have,
Hmm.
of course, talked to some game companies. And I was able to attend a play test pretty recently, the last couple weeks of a upcoming Web3 game, and
Hmm.
I'd have to
How did
say
that go?
it went pretty well. I mean, for what it was, it was a really early game, as
Hmm.
in I would say it's like half done, but it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. We're seeing that merger of like game companies start to move in and start to adopt blockchain. It was encouraging, I would say. Like I was encouraged by what I saw in this
Hmm.
playtest, even though it was such an early game. There's interesting good things going on in the industry. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I see a lot of mirroring of what's happened in the VR industry, which I've been heavily invested in, which is a lot of very small experiences at first. Then we move into sort of indies making their own thing, and the AAA's hanging back and watching to see what's successful and what's not successful and what works and doesn't, and then moving into that space. So with VR, for example, we're just starting to see AAA studios move into that space more, where the vast majority is indie developers. So I think we will continue to see the same types of things in blockchain, and therefore, what do we do to get games on the platform? Well, we support experiences, then we support indies, then we support AAAs, and we walk down that path as best we can, one step at a time.
Right, right. And definitely what we mentioned earlier, BlockJam is a huge part of that. I mean, this is the jump
Absolutely,
starting effort.
absolutely, yeah,
Okay, so let's see. I think we're pretty much at the end here, but we have a
yeah.
couple of things we could quickly mention. Number one, we do have some open positions. Eric, did you want to go through those?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think the newest one that was posted is we're certainly looking for a content lead, which is basically a writing position. And that's always I think it's fun. I think it's an exciting position, and it's certainly one that allows you to have a lot of impact at Nervos and in the industry. So that one is open and up there. I found out yesterday that marketing is looking to hire interns. So I don't know if that will be posted. So that's sort of the first news that you might get of this. And it's interesting because I think they're following our department. Yay, we're trendsetters. So we are bringing on 2 or 3 interns as well. And I think we want to, have the opportunity to share what we've learned with more people and help expand the industry in a professional and experienced way. So that's really exciting for us. And, I think the last, but certainly not the least, is we are always looking for, good developer support engineers. And, the industry is like just, short of good developer support engineers in general. So this is like a standing position, and, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. We do not discriminate in any shape or form. Like, please, we're begging you, send us a good application. So, those are the open positions. So what else is going on this month? Are we going to be anywhere, or what's going on?
Well, the big one is going to be Consensus actually, and we will be having a booth there. So that's in early June. That's in Austin, Texas, I believe. So yeah, Nervos has a booth there, and that's going to be Matt, Taylor, Kylie, Monica, Nate, Terry, and Jan. I believe are
Wow.
all going there. So it's a pretty big
So
attendance.
we have biz dev, devrel, marketing people, and founders and chief architect potentially will be there. So yeah, that's quite the crew. So I think that is, if I'm looking at my calendar correctly, that'd be like June 10, 11, 12, or somewhere around that. So it's 1 week before BlockJam. So we're going to be busy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean this for Consensus, like I know that I think what was the last one? The one that was in Florida recently. We had a couple people from the community actually
Permissionless, I
reach out,
think.
permissionless, yeah, reach out and said they were going to be there. Did we have any people there? And I think we might. I don't know. I can't remember if we had one or two
We
people there,
did.
but
I think it was
yeah.
sort of a last minute thing where we didn't have anything official going on, but people from Nervos flew there to to be in contact with the community and the builders and all the other vendors, and just get the pulse of what's going on. So we are all over the place all the time. Watch out, guys. But we certainly like to be part of the community and everything that's going on, even if we're not necessarily there in an official capacity.
Yeah, definitely. So anybody who wanted to meet up with the team and wasn't able to at permissionless, Consensus is the one. If you happen to be in the area, please do stop by the Nervos booth. We will have a whole bunch of people there. And I haven't actually even met some of these people yet. Monica, who's on our team, I have not met her in person yet. Let's see, and Terry and Jan, I still have been working with them for a couple of years now. I still have not met them in person. I'm actually getting a little bit of FOMO here. I think I am going to miss out by not being there.
Yeah, I think that it seems like a really good crew is going to be there. I got to be honest, we were talking about this on Twitter recently. Nervos is a pretty good place to work. We all get along really well, and I don't think we dread coming to work. We sort of look forward to coming to work and working with each other. So these type of events allow the team to meet up in person, since we are literally from all over the world. So it is nice in that sense.
Yeah, it definitely is. One of these days you're going to have to make it out here to the States, Erica. Where are you right now?
Yeah, so I'm out of country right now, but I should be back in Canada in, knock on wood, in the next couple of months. So it's sort of in the fall, I think is. And once that happens, I'll be easier to make it around to some of the events in the US. And certainly I would love to see us throw an event in Canada. I'll make people come to me for one time, and in and around Vancouver, I think will be a great place to do it. So I've been planting the seeds for that with different partners and saying hey, come to Vancouver, it's awesome. So yeah, hopefully we can make that happen.
Awesome. Well, let's see, I think we are out of time now. So anyway, unless there's anything you wanted to add, Eric, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And thank everybody thank you for being here, Eric. Thanks to everybody for listening. And we will be back next month with another episode of Hashing Out. And in the meantime, don't forget about BlockJam. You definitely want to look that up and look up the Nervos education and events Twitter spaces. They're happening all the time. And those are usually hosted by Kylie or Monica. And we have a lot of great guests and everything rolling through there all the time. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me, Jordan. It's been a real treat to talk to you about stuff that we love. So yeah, good conversation. Yeah, thanks for coming on. All right, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.